First Nations TV, your news first.
Federal Minister for Communications Michelle Rowland MP visited Darwin to launch the First Nations Digital Inclusion Plan, aimed to close the gap in digital inclusions for all Australians.
Today is a really exciting day. When I came to this position as Minister for Communications 12 months ago, I was made aware of my target in my portfolio for closing the gap, Target 17. That target is that by 2026, we will have equal levels of digital inclusion for all Australians. So, as Minister, I looked for the strategy that was in place to deliver that and the underlying data to be able to measure that. And what I found was that we had neither. However, today I'm very pleased to say that thanks to the good work by my colleagues at the NIAA and also with excellent input from my own First Nations Digital Inclusion Advisory Group, of whom I have members of that panel and that advisory body here today, we are now in a position to release the First Nations Digital Inclusion Plan. This strategy focuses on three key areas: access, affordability, and ability. And it sets out a framework for achieving targets within that. We actually had in the last few days the release of the Digital Inclusion Index. And what that has found is that the gap between those who are digitally included and those who are excluded continues to be more pronounced for First Nations communities, and that is exacerbated by remoteness. The gap overall is 7.5. We need to close that gap. The way we are going to do that is by having a strategy like this that has measurable plans and that is capable of being achieved with cooperation from the federal government, from state and territory governments, from stakeholders and from industry itself. That is what is going to close the gap. That is what the Albanese government is committed to doing. So I'm very pleased that today we are able to launch this very important plan that provides a baseline and also strategies for achieving digital inclusivity for First Nations Australians. This plan sets out as a first priority the issue of accessibility, and I commend Minister Arkit here in the Northern Territory, with whom I have had very constructive engagement about how we in the comms portfolio design our programs that are about co-investment in access. And to give you a concrete example, we have over $30 million that's set aside for First Nations and remote areas for infrastructure development. So that's in terms of mobile black spots, but also any other bespoke models that the private sector would seek to co-invest in with the federal government. What we have through a process of consultation is set aside amounts that are specifically for First Nations, and also design those so that as the department assesses those applications, we look to some of those drivers around how this is going to promote First Nations digital inclusion.
Internet access is an essential service for most Australians, and it's an essential service as services go online for health, education and other economic development issues. We also see that digital inclusion is important for economic development in regional and remote Australia. And as First Nations people, we would like to see that digital divide close.
Telstra is absolutely committed to closing the gap, Target 17. We actually fund the digital inclusion research and more recently the Mapping the Gap research, which focuses on remote Australia. So Telstra does want to collaborate across industry with governments to close this gap by 2026. And we look forward to doing more great work through the expert panel supporting the advisory group.
The Northern Territory Indigenous Business Network is absolutely thrilled about this announcement today. The investment is so important because it means we can turn some reality around infrastructure requirements for unlocking the Aboriginal estate into reality for our people and our business members. As the peak body for Aboriginal business, we know that access is really important, and infrastructure in our remote communities isn't just roads, it's high-speed networks, it's accessibility to ongoing, stable infrastructure that will keep everybody online, and it will help us to create innovative new economies online, particularly in tourism, arts, culture and digital tech. We see Industry 4.0 as the real opportunity to take our people out of poverty in a single generation. We're really, really grateful to the Commonwealth and to the Indigenous Advisory Group for driving this forward, and we look forward to partnering to see this come to fruition.
First Nations TV, your news first.